Okay, this video is to show you how to make the Teneriffe lace knot. It's used throughout the lace making. Some motifs have more knots than others. All motifs have knots around the outer edge, if nothing else. Here's an example of a motif made almost entirely with knots. So there are the three red rows, this white row and this red row on the outer edge are all made with Teneriffe lace knots. So there's almost nothing in this one made without. There's just a little bit of wrapping here. So as you just could see from that last example, the knot can be used anywhere within the wheel. It could be on the outer edge or it could be on the inner, or anywhere in between. So how do you do it? It is possible to knot just one end, in other words, one half of one pair. It's possible to knot two together. It's possible to knot two across a pair. It's possible to knot four ends together, 5 ends, 6 ends. The more ends that you try to include in the knot, the harder it will be for the knot to form and to hold. So you'll have to experiment. It's a combination of your thread, how much tension is on your loom, where you are in the part of the wheel, and how many other rows there are competing with the slack in the loom. So I can't give you an exact number, like don't try to knot more than 6 ends, because it can vary, but you'll know very quickly whether you'll have difficulty with the knots holding or not. So you want to bring the thread down towards you and pick up. I'm going to, for simplicity's sake and to start with, I'm going to knot 2 ends that are side by side. So I'm putting my needle underneath the 2 ends with the working thread underneath the needle. I'm going to bring the working thread around over the top of the needle and under the needle. I'm going to put my finger there to hold some tension on it, and I'm going to pull this thread through, and ideally straight up. A little bit easier said than done when you have a tripod standing in front of you. So put the thread down towards your body, pick up the amount of ends that you want to knot, 2 in this case, side by side. Put the thread over the needle, under the needle, and pull the thread straight up. Put your needle under the ends that you want to knot. Bring your working thread over the needle, under the needle, and pull up. Put your needle under the ends that you want to knot. Bring your thread over, under, and pull up. Now there's a couple of problems that can arise. One is that you get too much thread in between the knots so that it's not a straight line between the 2 knots. One is that the knots won't necessarily hold if you were to try to knot 8 or 10 or 12 ends. You might have a lot of difficulty getting that to hold. If you end up with too much thread between the knots, well, really it's starting with proactively trying to prevent that from happening. So that's one of the reasons why I put my finger on here to hold it firm. Whoops. But if as you're working you realize you're going to have too much thread, you can put your needle in the knot and insist that it go where you want it to. If it ends up being there and you haven't realized that it's happening, then you'll have to undo your knot and sort it out. So now I could knot a pair, but from two different across the space. Same thing, put the thread down below, pick up the two ends, bring my thread around, and bring it up. Now I'll continue with that pattern for a few, so that you can see that a triangle shape will start to appear. So I'm starting to get these triangles. You can slide these knots up and down the ends to some extent. So if you find that when you've placed a knot it isn't quite in the right place, you can just move it up or down with your fingers or with your needle. Now if I wanted to knot three ends, I could pick up 1, 2, 3 ends, and it's just the same knot. And I could knot 4 ends, so I'm picking up 2 and 2. I could knot 6 ends. Holding pretty well, it's not coming loose here, and so on. If I want to work another row, let's say I wanted to go up 1 centimeter and do a different pattern, I could cut my thread and put a little drop of glue on it and just re-knot my thread on at a different place and continue to work. Or I could just draw my thread up to the level that I want to work at. So I'm going to go up my centimeter or so, and I'm just going to bring my thread up and over and yes, I do have a piece of thread running along the ends here, and that is just the way it is. It's not a problem. You may not like the look of that, in which case you can cut your thread off and restart it at a higher level. Okay, on the wrong side, you could move your thread around. For example, the woman who made this piece of lace, I can't take credit for it, who lives in Brazil, Estela, has drawn her thread. She finished what she wanted to do, the knots that she wanted to do up here. She's drawn her thread just across the back of the lace and looped it around the base of the petal, and then drawn it up here and done the knots that she wanted to do. Then she's taken her thread back down, secured it, jumped over, and moved up, done the knots that she wants to do up here, moved down, and finished it off. So you can do quite a lot of moving around on the back rather than cutting off your thread and starting fresh. Now you will find in some of the documentation that I've given you links to, there are pictures of the knot itself. I find this book is the 50 heirloom buttons to make, which Meg Cheeseman used in the Dorset button class, if you were lucky enough to have taken that class. She mentioned it, not saying she used it. And they demonstrate how the thread is wrapped around the needle. And I thought this was the best, actually, illustration of the knot of any that I'd ever found. You might want to take a excuse me, you might want to take a screenshot of that so you can refer to it in the future. And Gina B of Gina B Silkworks, she also has an illustration. This illustration goes back like 100 years. It's in pretty much every resource that's on the resource list. So that's another way of illustrating it. But as you can see, the thread is being brought over the needle, under the needle, and then the knot would be pulled up and secured. Okay.